Welcome to Sports from the Couch.
I gotta say, it's the stupidest thing in sports.
With your host, Mike Mercado.
Players cannot stand him. Coaches cannot stand him. Most importantly, the fans can't stand him.
Brought to you by Mercado Airwaves.
I'm gonna say it once, and hopefully I'm wrong, but it's a disaster waiting to happen.
That is so bad, that is absolutely brutal.
Hello and welcome in, friends, to another edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and I want to thank you so much for making us a part of your Monday this March 1st, 2021. And if we are changing the calendar to March, that means baseball is here. And if baseball is here, we need best friend of the show from Baseball Weekend Journal, Paul Chivari, to join us and talk all about the major storylines and what is happening to our favorite local teams here in Chicago. But before we get to all the major news and notes from Major League Baseball, let's take care of some housekeeping notes. You can follow me all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and the show's on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. Like, rate, review, and shares wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. Become a producer of the show at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves, the home to our interviews with athletes and celebrities that you could get ad-free and before anybody else. That's patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Check out our swag at teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Come play video games with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves. And keep up to date with everything we're doing on the network, from the True Crime Show, the Pop Culture Show, our sister podcast, the Gone Missing Podcast, by following us on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves.
I asked Jobu to come take fear from bats. I offered him cigar and rum. He will come.
You know, you might think about taking Jesus Christ as your savior instead of fooling around with all this stuff.
Harris. Jesus. I like him very much. But he no help with curveball.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?
It is one of my favorite times of the year, my friends, where we get to put a rest to this damn snow, tell winter that it could go kick rocks and pound some sand. It is one of my favorite times all of year when we get to talk to one of our best friends of the show. And not just that, the birthday boy, the legend himself, one of the hardest working people in the industry. Check out all his work at Baseball Weekend Journal. They're on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud. I mean, you name it. They're all over the social media realm at Baseball Weekend. And you can follow the man personally. Give him a happy birthday this whole week. Let's celebrate him this entire week. He is at Twitter at Paul Chivari. Paul, what's going on, my man?
Oh man, that felt good. That was a great intro. I felt like you should have like music behind it to like kind of like a crowd building up with it.
Intern, get to it.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always great to be on the show. And man, spring training, man, the games are here. I'm feeling a little bit warmer. I see a lot of snow on the ground, but it's starting to melt. I'm feeling a little warmer. Baseball is going to be here in like a month, man, for games that count. I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped. How about you?
I'm super excited. I'm excited for the stories and scenarios that could play out on both sides of town here locally in Chicago. I'm super interested to see if the Dodgers could go back-to-back. I want to see how this NL East plays out. How lazy is the NL Central? What is going to happen in the American League Central? Can the White Sox fulfill the prophecy that we have put amongst them? And Paul, we're having an entire season to talk about all that. But on today's episode of Sports from the Couch, where we are talking to one of the best in the business here locally, he is a man that 365 is deep into the baseball niche, and every weekend he already put one out there. Guys, he's celebrating his birthday, and he released an episode this morning, so make sure you guys are checking it out. We're recording this on a Sunday morning, so make sure you're checking that out at Baseball Weekend Journal. But Paulie, I want to start off with kind of let's start backwards before we kind of move forward. And spring training is right here. The beloved White Sox are going to be playing the Brewers on television. People are going to be able to watch the first pitch being thrown. What were your thoughts of this offseason, though? And, you know, kind of the lack thereof when it comes to movement and big names. And there were splashes here and there. There were trades even here locally, some signings here locally. But it wasn't the offseason that a lot of people thought, or maybe the nihilist thought would happen. Kind of your general thoughts heading into this 2021 summer.
Well, I mean, first of all, that offseason was historic. And I don't know if you mentioned, you were saying White Sox Brewers, but there's games already going right now. I mean, if you can hear that in the background, that is Blue Jays and Yankees live right now as we're recording this.
You mean that's America? That is America.
This is here. This is live going on in our world right now. This is awesome.
Well, we'll see how the Yankees end, dude. That's going to be a story that we're going to be having to follow the entire season too.
Dude, I'm psyched. But no, it was a historic offseason. I mean, think about just coming off the pandemic season, of course, and then trying to come up with new safety protocols to try and figure out a full season. And then there's a back and forth there. And I'm glad that they came to a quick conclusion they're going to try and do the 162 and that they had so few tests. But of course you have Hank Aaron passing away. In addition to all of the Hall of Famers we've lost over the last year as well. And then just the movement, like Trevor Bauer, I think basically turned a social media presence into a high contract. I think that's ultimately what he did. Not to diminish his accomplishments, but a baseball player to get that kind of contract, that's just impressive. But yeah, I mean, it was such a great offseason with just some of the ways teams are improving, some of the ways that some of these teams are built. I don't know, like Tony La Russa coming to the White Sox. That's one of the craziest stories, I think, of the offseason. The minor leagues now being kind of soaked up by Major League Baseball. Like, I mean, with that sort of movement and like the affiliation changes, some of the structural changes with the leagues and the development stages. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in for the beginning of a new era of baseball. It might have already started. It's interesting. It's just, I think historic is the way you'd sum up this offseason as far as from a baseball standpoint.
You know, it's interesting you say that because there was a lot of action. There was a lot of big movement. We've seen the New York Mets put their flag when it comes to trying to be a true contender. You're absolutely correct on that. Where I think it's really interesting is the perspective of it, where, let's say here locally, I mean, you and I, we love, the entire Major League Baseball and everything that encompasses, but we're also fans at heart too. So you're a fan of the South Side. I'm a fan of the North Side. And obviously here in Chicago before, let's say the Cubs were making moves or lack thereof when they were getting rid of John Lester and they were getting rid of Kyle Schwarber, or at least letting them go. And then you get Jock Peterson in and you're bringing in Jake Arrieta. So the perspectives of this offseason, while they did trade Yu Darvish, I think it's really weird how so many people say there wasn't a lot of action, but at the same time, there was a big story happening every single day, every single week. So with that, what do you think is going to be the major story, kind of the highlighted story, the thing that we all kind of go when it comes to our cliff notes of this offseason? Is it the death of some of these legends? Is it the death of the minor league system in a certain point? Where do you think the narrative will be 10, 15 years down the road in your gut that this offseason represented?
I think the market shift that you were already kind of seeing slipping a lot because of the pandemic season. I think that, just the way the contracts worked out with, on the higher end, there were guys that got great contracts, but for the most part, it seemed like kind of a down year for what some of these signings are. A lot of 1-year deals. It's just a kind of a different era, and we'll see how it gets ironed out in the collective bargaining dispute that they're going to have at the end of the season. I don't know. I mean, it's I would say that when you look at it down the road, because I think this is kind of an era that's in a transition right now or a shift right now. I think you are just going to look at like the Dodgers probably breaking their title drought is probably going to be one of the highlights of this offseason, because it's like, though that's last season's accomplishment, they get to kind of ride that out all winter. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's when you look at it, just like a market shift overall, and we'll see how that affects the future to see how important that storyline is. But I think, Dodgers winning. And of course, I think you got to mention Hank Aaron and some of the Hall of Famers too. Cause I mean, we lost 10 different guys, I think, since the start of last season, or maybe in a 15-month span. It's ridiculous from a history standpoint. That's an end of an era too, so it's just, neat to see how the game is transitioning into its future, but you just got to hope that at the highest professional level, these guys are able to work out their business and not let it affect those who appreciate, what a joy it is to watch the best in the world play against each other.
I think for as bad as everybody kind of talks about the future of baseball, I do think that this new era that we keep talking about, I think it is a good thing. I think player empowerment is not just a social media thing. I think it's important for a league to thrive in today's day and age of capitalistic markets and how we are as a society and how sports has always been a reflection of that. So I'm with you. I think the more and more these players know their value and the more and more fans support the players as much as they can, along with supporting their favorite team, and we find that sweet middle that doesn't exist, but we kind of go to for that journey. I think that's really important. And I want to put a kind of a pinpoint when it comes to the legends. What's really sad is some of these legends are leaving us. And in the NBA specifically, we haven't had an era really leave us yet. And now you're starting to see that. And then we had somebody leave us way too soon in Kobe Bryant. Baseball has always done a great job of celebrating its legends that have left us. And it's going to be really interesting that now there's going to be fans in the stands, how they memorialize Hank Aaron. And, it's going to be sad when we start seeing a lot of these legends start leaving us. And for baseball purists, that is a big thing that we haven't seen in a little while, is us start losing a whole generation.
I think Hank Aaron's going to be a folk hero, man. Hammer and Hank. He was a legend when he was with us. So I just can only imagine, I think he's up there all time with like Babe Ruth. I think that name needs to be thrown about a little bit more, what he means. So I don't know. And Willie Mays is the oldest living guy, and he's older than Hank. So, there's so many people from that era, that were so great and we've lost them already. And that's, some of the last guys from, that played in the 50s, that were winning World Series, back then, and then played, as late as the 70s with Mays and Aaron. But it's just, we're all getting older, man. That's just kind of the way I look at it, because now it just makes me think of the next generation. Some of the baby boomer generation that played in the 60s, 70s, 80s is now the next crop of the older guys, the sages of the game, and you'll see it, if they have a Cooperstown, it's supposed to be the class of 2020 and the class of 2021, which was convenient that no one got voted in 2021 for the writers. But they're going to combine the two classes. Hawk Harrelson and Al Michaels will give the Ford C. Frick Award speeches. That's pretty cool. As a broadcaster, really cool. I love it. As a White Sox fan,
yes, absolutely.
That's pretty cool. I think we talked about how crazy Al Michaels is going into the Baseball Hall of Fame as a broadcaster, and Joe Buck is going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a broadcaster.
I kind of love it though, because are they vice versa yet?
What do you mean?
Is Al Michaels in Canton and is Joe Buck in Cooperstown?
I want to say Al Michaels has to be in Canton, because I think they've gotten all the guys that have called a Super Bowl in Canton. And I think that's why, Buck has to complete it, except for maybe Nance isn't in. I don't know. But I want to say Michaels is in. I could be wrong about that.
Let us know on Twitter.
Joe Buck is not in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He will be.
He will be.
He should be. Yeah.
The man called Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs, White Sox World Series. Yeah, he'll get in there.
Yeah. Yeah. How many World Series has he called? Like 25 at least?
That's
crazy.
Like that? That's crazy. Speaking of that, Paulie, I want to talk a little bit, and baseball does a great job of celebrating its legacy. You and I just started talking about the broadcasters. That's how much legacy means to this sport, and I think they're getting better at social media. I think they're finally starting to understand how important it is, and you know what? I also think they're starting to embrace the softball community, the collegiate softball community, which is really important, and it's also just more eyes, more people to your product. And I think that will be triple the exposure. We talk about the Cubs, the White Sox, the Red Sox, the Yankees, but all those teams, probably other than the Yankees, the Dodgers being able to go back to back would be probably the biggest story baseball can ask for. What do you think their chances are without really taking the deep dive and we having the spring training ahead of us, and Lord knows how this world is going to be in just 2 months, but what are your thoughts about the chances of baseball having a back-to-back champion with the Dodgers?
It could happen. The way the Dodgers are built, and I think, kind of how, the imbalance of the big market teams, or that's a brand. The Dodgers are a brand. I don't think the Kansas City Royals are necessarily a brand. They technically are, but you don't see a lot of people wearing those hats around the world. I think the way the Dodgers are built, the amount of money that they can spend, they're the National League Yankees. So they're going to be in it every year. And the way that Andrew Friedman has that team built is it's impressive. Strong from top to bottom. They always seem to have a new great prospect coming up all the time, filtering guys in, and then they add Trevor Bauer to an already impressive starting rotation. It could happen, but I think the National League is just going to be just a dogfight, though. I mean, think of like who could have the pitching by the end of it that could outlast, everybody. I mean, everyone's got a stacked team if you think about it, with the Braves, the Dodgers, the Padres. I would throw the Cardinals as the sneaky. Anyone that wins the NL Central, Cubs if they win it, anyone that wins the NL Central could be sneaky enough depending on the pitching. The Cardinals, I would say, probably the favorite out of all of those. Yeah. The East, whoever comes out of the East.
What do you think about the East?
I think it's the toughest division. So I did my preview of the NL East first, and that was last week. So if anyone wants to listen to that, check out Baseball Weekend Journal. I think it's nice to see, a lot of people disagree with this statement, but it's nice to see the Mets are kind of no longer in the stupid column, even though they still kind of are in the stupid column, just because everything that could be the Metsiest Mets thing happens to them. Yeah. Such as some of their front office or, just the routine firings that happen shortly after hirings that seem to be happening. And then, but the ownership change with Steve Cohen and the Mets. So now they're for real, now they're going to make some better business decisions, and they have the capital to back it up. Get ready for the Mets. And I think making the Lindor trade was that was a splash for sure. Whether I'm sold completely on them or not, they really do have a interesting roster, great starting pitching, some relievers that I think can perform better than what we've seen from them in recent years. A healthy Dylan Betances in the bullpen, hopefully. It could be a fearsome batting order. It could be a tough team. But then you look at a team like the Phillies have been trying to build themselves to something like that, but maybe they don't have all the pitching they need. They have just, if everyone's healthy, a tight knit of hitters. The Nationals, let's not count them out there. I think the pandemic season was going to be rough on them no matter what, because they're the defending champions. So you have the target on your back, and it's kind of hard to replicate that year to year as a baseball team. I think there's something to be said, to how grueling of a season it is if you're the last team playing. Yes, you get the victory, of the spoils or whatever, the spoils of victory, but you also have that long season, that wear and tear on you to play that many games, 200 games almost, probably more in the 180 range, but still, it's a grind. So don't count out the Nationals because they're another year removed, from that championship. And I think they did kind of, despite losing, big players like Bryce Harper and Anthony Rendon, they're still coming up with creative ways to kind of supplement what they already have there with the Strasburg-Scherzer combo. And I think Strasburg's supposed to be healthy this year. Will probably make, hopefully, a whole full season of starts. But, it's going to be another interesting team there. And then, then don't count out the Atlanta Braves, the team that's actually won the division the last 3 years. They could do it again easily. They didn't lose too much, and they're the same. It's the same exact roster they had for what was it, like Game 5 or Game 4 of the NLCS, in terms of what their ideal sort of lineup is going to be.
That's why I think the NL East, while it may be the strongest division going into the playoffs, it might be one of those feast or famine things where they're going to eat each other alive. There's going to be the top teams, but by the time you get into October and you're going against a buzzsaw that is the Dodgers or the Padres, or you playing a sneaky team like the Cardinals with 2 former MVPs on them, it's going to be tough, but it's going to be interesting. They do have firepower when it comes to some of those teams in that division. But Paulie, we got to move on, because here in Chicago, we all know that there are 2 roads in 2 different sides of town and emotions going into this season. We'll start off in the north side, and this is the big question heading into the season, and hell, just going to be lingering into the trade deadline. Will the Cubs re-sign 1, 2, or 3 of Javi Baez, Chris Bryant, and Wilson Contreras?
Contreras, Bryant, and Baez, right?
Yes.
I thought you were going to say Rizzo, because I think that's a given. I think that's a
slam dunk.
Anthony Rizzo will end his career
Yes.
with the Cubs or come pretty darn close.
But of these three, is it 1, 2, 3, none? What combination? What happens to these three centerpieces of either trades or rebuilding amongst another faux redo?
Keep Baez, trade Contreras, trade Bryant, trade Bryant.
So that's what you do. What do you think happens?
That's what I think happens.
What would you do?
Same thing.
Interesting.
Well, let me think about that. What would I do? But that's what I think is going to happen. Keep Baez, trade Contreras, trade Bryant, and keep Rizzo.
What do you think is the value going to be if those scenarios? Is it all depending? Is this something that's going to happen mid-season? Is this something off-season? What are you playing at?
I think for sure. Okay, so presumably the Cubs won't be in the hunt, or maybe they will be, but maybe it's going to be kind of a sign that they're going to gas out at some point, or they just don't want to sacrifice a bunch to get what they need to try to get to the playoff hunt. Let's say that going into July or mid-July. I know several teams want Chris Bryant, whether it's the Mets, the Braves, Dodgers, but I think they're happy with Justin Turner now. But there's going to be someone. There's going to be someone in the playoff hunt that's looking for another guy, third baseman, a guy that can also play a little bit of left field, right? I mean, you could move Bryant around the diamond in certain spots or have him pinch hit if you desperately need him down the stretch. And I think it's not going to be a blockbuster trade with just given how it will be a free agent at the end of the year. So it's just more of a rental. But I think it should at least net the Cubs one decent prospect that could help their farm system. Just one more piece for the future that should be a guaranteed major leaguer. That's what I think the best case scenario would be out of that. But we'll see. I just think the fact that they haven't come to an agreement. I think we've talked about this over the years, how just, it's kind of telling that something has not happened between those two sides, and everything you hear, especially with Bryant has a Scott Boras representation.
Now, what do you think about the recent news of Chris Bryant saying that he is open to conversations to re-sign with the Cubs? Do you think that's
Of course he is, because he lost his value. When they offered him what they offered him, he should have taken it, or demanded a trade if he was that unhappy there. But I mean, no one really does that in baseball, and I think he was happy at the moment because it's a World Series. But like, the Cubs can't let this go to waste. If they let Chris Bryant play this season without trading him, and then they're not able to re-sign him, you got a World Series out of it. But like, how could you have a guy for team control like that and not be able to flip it for another asset, or be able to use him as someone that you keep around for a while? So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just unfortunate that Chris Bryant and the Cubs can't come to some sort of agreement. I don't see it happening. And I think the Cubs could really, there's a market for him for sure. And hopefully he kind of regains the form. He should be a better player than what some of his numbers were the last few seasons too. The fact that he came into this league as an MVP, basically, he hasn't really been able to replicate what he did early on in his career. And I think there's still time with him to be able to do that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he puts himself out there to be on the trade market. But I see it happening. As far as Wilson Contreras, I think there's just a lot of value to a catcher that can hit like that. And just, that's a guy that you can build a team around, or at least kind of rally a team around. I think of like maybe a little bit more of an emotional Salvador Perez with the Royals, or like a Yadi Molina type of character, but just maybe a little bit more of an offensive powerhouse than Molina. I think of that with Contreras, that he could be one of the better catchers in the National League for a while, but probably more of his bat, which means you're still going to want to keep him around. You might be able to convert him to a third baseman or first baseman towards the end of his career. So if I'm a GM around the league and I'm looking like, well, do the Cubs want to build with Wilson Contreras, or do they want to go in a new direction? The way I see it is, I don't think the Cubs do want to keep Wilson Contreras. They might, but I could see them getting a lot of value out of that. Now, I don't know. He's not a free agent at the end of this year, right? I mean, he has a little bit more team control, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So, that puts even more value on it. So that's the one where you could really reboot your farm system if they're really going in true rebuild mode. Now, I know that's something that like the league doesn't want to, the whole thing with Kevin Mather from Seattle talking about that. It's just been kind of the way baseball goes. So, there's going to be some sort of adjustment to that, I would think, in that off-season, CBA. But, I don't know if, in the future, how that's going to change the way teams, are going to be able to hold on or convert a guy like that, to be able to flip a guy like that. I think there has to be a market for that too, where if you have a guy under team control, on the cheap, he still has trade value to him. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what sort of adjustments are made to the way business is handled with guys that are kind of brought in-house and brought up through the farm system. But the way I see the Cubs going, it's just trending in that direction where they're stepping really far away from what the World Series team was. And the whole thing about that World Series team was how young those guys were. So, I mean, I never envisioned that by 2021, most of that would be over and there would be questions about whether or not they're going to bring certain guys back. I would have thought by now, especially with some of the contracts that you've seen over the last few years, like Nolan Arenado, being locked up with the Rockies, even though he got traded. But that just shows you anything can happen, and it doesn't matter if the guy wants to play with the team forever or not. But I'm surprised that Chris Bryant didn't accept the deal earlier. He could have been paid way more money and not have to have grievances with the league. And then, I mean, if he's unhappy, there's still a market for Chris Bryant that the Cubs could try and find. But thankfully, from the Cubs standpoint, they didn't have him signed because he wouldn't be the value of what he would have signed for a few years ago, coming off of MVP caliber seasons. So. I just think it's interesting, the market on a guy. I think Chris Bryant gambled on himself and lost. If it's true that he allegedly turned down a major offer from the Cubs a few years ago.
And we'll see how it is impacted as we move forward, especially when we see Tatis get his new deal and knowing that if that's the absolute skyrocket at top that you get with him and Mike Trout and Nolan Arenado and so on and so forth, we know Bryant at this point cannot get to that. So we'll see how this plays out. But you are here on Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and we are here with best friend of the show, the birthday boy, covers the MLB and everything Major League Baseball like a blanket, Paul Chivari from Baseball Weekend Journal. Follow him all over the socials at Baseball Weekend. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul Chivari and check out the podcast, Baseball Weekend Journal, wherever you get your favorite podcast. They just put a new episode up this Sunday on his birthday weekend as he celebrates. He still had the love for the people, the community, the sports to put out those glorious opinions. And speaking of glorious, my man, we got to talk about one of the most intriguing, most exciting teams in baseball. From MVP awards to managerial hiring controversy, doesn't matter, because at the end of this day, I believe this White Sox team has so much potential, has so much hype, has so many ambitions. The real question to me, and I'm going to ask you, put your feet to the fire, is it World Series or bust for the Chicago White Sox?
Oh, well, absolutely. And I'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, once again, thanks for having me on the show. The best part about having a birthday March 1st is baseball is usually starting up, and there's just a buzz about, just the warmer weather on the horizon and baseball being played. I don't know. It's always fun that I get to watch, for the most part, every year, spring training games on my birthday. So, but as for the White Sox, yeah, I mean, I think this is the first time I can remember since maybe like 2006, maybe the only other time in my life being a White Sox fan, that there was expectations of a World Series going into a season. They're absolutely, I think when you make a hire like Tony La Russa, you're telling people that you want to win a World Series. That is your intention, regardless of whether or not the old guy has it still or not. His track record speaks for himself. He's one of the 23 men ever to walk the earth to be dubbed a Hall of Fame manager. So yeah, if he wants to go back in the dugout, there's high expectations. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. It's such a weird hire. I mean, we might have talked about that officially or unofficially somewhere on a podcast. I just think I don't disagree with the hire. I don't know if I totally agree with the hire. I understand the hire from a White Sox standpoint. I guess I just never realistically thought that, one, Tony La Russa would want to come out of retirement at the age of 76 to manage again, and two, to manage the White Sox ever again. But it just kind of makes sense when you think about, there was some unfinished business with him and Jerry Reinsdorf back in '86 when Ken the Hawk Harrelson, of all people, fired Tony La Russa as manager. That's a weird statement to come out of my mouth, but that's the White Sox.
That's White Sox, baby.
Yeah, that's the White Sox. Yeah. So I mean, of course, Tony La Russa comes back when the highest of expectations for the team. This might have been planned a few years ago, if you really think about it. Reinsdorf and La Russa, if they ever kind of talked in private, I'm sure it probably got brought up like, hey, would you ever come back if the situation was right? Oh, absolutely, Jerry, anything for you. So, they deserve each other. And I really do hope, one last yippee-ki-yay, in their golden years. I'm all for it. It's basically a bet between two old farts, I suppose. but I love it. I mean, it's the White Sox. These are some professionals you're talking about here with sports ownership, with a chairman like Jerry Reinsdorf, and a general manager like Rick Hahn that basically proved that you can rebuild a team with a core. I mean, and I think out of all the teams, more so than the Padres and other teams, they're doing it more so with a core than they're doing it with adding too many extra guys. Of course, they've added free agents, but they're not. They think they have the best talent already in house. They didn't spend their money on big name free agents, even though they tried. They definitely expressed interest in Machado and Harper, but they got who they got. They got the team that they think they can win with, and I think on paper it looks like a pretty darn good team. Now, of course, the Yankees look like a pretty darn good team, and I you and I talked about it in the playoffs last year, and I slept on the Astros, and it's like, of course the Astros are going to win. Like, they have a good core. Now that's being broken up a little bit, but at the same time, it looked like the Astros were kind of a different team in the playoffs last year. It seemed like they're transitioning from what we saw win the World Series a few years ago, and they improvised and got all the way to one game away from the World Series. So I think that's another team, that could be a threat, to the World Series intentions of the White Sox. But for the first time in a long time, I look at that White Sox team and I say, yeah, this is a team that should be one of the greats of the season. Let's see if they can do it.
So, Paulie, I don't know if you've been listening to the news lately or have been part of the community, that trading cards have been a big thing, and it got me thinking about the Chicago White Sox. It's the investment I wanted to get in early on, some of the things that I think this team can be. So, for example, I got a Luis Robert card. I got myself an Eloy card. This team has a lot of MVP candidates. Do you think there's a chance?
Jose Abreu. I mean, in the MVP from last year. But yeah.
But do you think that there's a chance they could run it back and have another MVP this season with another player?
I'd have to think about that. I mean, I guess the likely candidates, okay, so Moncada, Jimenez, Robert, Abreu. I don't think Madrigal could be. Maybe Grandal if he goes on like an insane tear. But that'd be hard for a catcher. What outfield we're looking at? Adam Eaton, Robert, Jimenez, we said already, in DH. Andrew Vaughn, if he really is like a breakout player, but I don't think so. I mean, he'd have to be like at least what Aaron Judge or Pete Alonso did in their rookie seasons, I think, in order to be an MVP type of candidate. Otherwise, it'd have to be a pitcher. I mean, if like Lucas Giolito is, due for a Hall of Fame year this year, that could be the case. I think just with Keuchel's age and some of his injury problems, I just don't know, but he's been a Cy Young candidate. So, I mean, who knows? Lance Lynn, total pro, but at the same time, we're talking about MVP from a pitcher, and this is a guy that's never won a Cy Young. So,
but MVPs, MVP wise for this team.
Yeah, MVP. I'm trailing off, but yeah, I think the only way it's not one of the ones that we named out of like the Moncada, Jimenez, Abreu and Robert, it's got to be Grandal. But he, for a catcher, he's got to go on a tear. It's possible.
But do you think there's a chance for it? Like, do you think Eloy and Luis Robert can actually do it?
No, because it's so hard when you have teams with a lot of good hitters. I mean, I know sometimes you find that there's, a good player on a team with a guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's like a guy wins MVP, and of course he had a teammate that was good. The Pippen to his Jordan or whatever.
Sure.
But I think there's just way too many guys that could be like that. It's possible, but I mean, limiting it to that, to like, it's got to be then like Grandal, Madrigal, or Eaton, basically. I don't think so. Or Andrew Vaughn. I don't think so.
So do you think that there's ever a time or a period in which Eloy or Luis Robert are MVP candidates?
I think so. I mean, I think you were starting to see what Robert is capable of. I mean, he really didn't get a lot of playing time. I think he was kind of robbed of the fact that it was a shortened season. Whether he was going to put in his first full 162, but he still hasn't put in a full 162. So let's pump the brakes on him and see what he's capable of. There's a flash of it in his first month of his career, but then he disappeared in the second month. So he still has to show that he's made the adjustments that, to counter what adjustments were made on him in the last month of 2020. But I want to say he hit like a really awesome home run in that series against the A's in the playoffs. So, I mean, it's not like, he totally disappeared there. It's something's there with that player. But I think it's a little still too early to say that, because that'd also be like a rookie of the year almost, even though he might have exceeded his limits. But Eloy, I think, is taking a step closer to it. But at the same time, Jose Abreu, everyone doubts him with his age, but he continues to hit for a high average, which of course helps with an on base, and he can slug. I mean, he can hit doubles and home runs, and he proved it last year in the pandemic season. I don't know if he can do it in a 162 this year, but he is last year's MVP. So let's see what he can do. As for Moncada, he had COVID last year, so I don't know if he was 100% throughout the season. And I think there was an adjustment there for him coming off of it. So now hopefully he's stronger and healthier coming into the season and can put in the full 162. I mean, we saw flashes of it in 2019. He's getting better and better. And especially as a switch hitter, he's probably going to be a force in this league for a while. So I think that's the logical, I think, is Moncada more so than all of them. I think is my favorite right now. I think to be the most likely MVP candidate here on the 1st of March, but we'll see what happens spring training. We'll see who gets off to the hottest start. We'll see what this team looks like at the All-Star break. We're so far ways away. They might get off to a very rough start. We just don't know. Cold weather in Chicago. You never know. It might take a minute. So I'm excited though. I mean, for the first time in a long time, I'm really excited about a White Sox team that I truly believe is a championship caliber team. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do it, but I'm just saying they're definitely one of the 5 or 6 teams in the conversation right now in the beginning of spring training. Who's the favorite teams this year to win the World Series.
As you should be excited, and as should White Sox fans be excited, baseball fans should be excited. It's an exciting team. They're going to be interesting to follow the entire season, and it's going to be really fun if these guys turn out. We've already seen one MVP of the group. It's going to be interesting and fascinating and fun to see if others develop, and hopefully it turns a little bit better than it did in the North Side. But if you're able to claim a championship in the South Side with this regime, that is awesome, and all of it is right there for them. So I think White Sox fans should be ready and hopefully safely be able to watch your team up close and personal. But Paulie, before we let you go so you can celebrate your birthday, we got one more thing for you. We need you to look into the crystal ball. Paulie, will there be baseball after this season?
Yeah, I guarantee at some point in our lives there will be baseball again. Will there be a strike at this time? Are we talking about a strike next year on this date?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I mean, I would think by then they'd been able to hammer it out. And I was positing this on 12-ounce radio out in Michigan. Does all this stuff help with the collective bargaining agreement? The way the pandemic season was almost an experiment with different things they were trying to speed up the game and, limit contact and just move it along. I'm talking with the runner starting on second base, which they're bringing back this year, or the 7-inning double headers, which they do in the minor leagues. I think those are things that are probably things that were never going to be discussed until it got down to that agreement, so who knows what sort of back and forth there would have been on that. I think now that everyone's seen it in play, those things are almost a given, universal DH, things like that. So I think in some ways the pandemic season kind of helped kind of answer questions about what would that look like after an agreement is made like that. But at the same time, I think it doesn't help with what Kevin Mather just did, giving a lot of leverage to the players in their negotiations to determine what's a better system to develop players and keep them under control, but not for, manipulation of service time and things like that. So we'll see how that gets ironed out. But with Mather, giving that leverage to the players, there's good negotiators on the league side. So, I mean, I think that's what's going to make it a little bit more of a back and forth, is I think the players can state their case very plainly, very easily. We'll see if Major League Baseball wants to change the way they conduct their business because of this. I think that'll be one of the biggest strong points there. And then playoff revenue, I think, how they're going to, if they're going to expand the playoffs, how they're going to distribute the wealth, and then how are they going to plan for pandemic seasons in the future? Not that they necessarily have to do this, but I think everything had to learn on the fly. I think with contingencies, they do have to start thinking of, well, what's the hazard situation? How do we go about it? At least some bylaws to how we negotiate that process so that they're not doing what they did last time. I mean, I think that was ridiculous. That I think basically the owners got their way to kind of delay the season, but at the same time, I think the players offered some pretty decent deals along the way that could have expanded the season a little bit longer and not made it what it was, maybe with a few more days off to kind of account for outbreaks that they had, and the way they had to kind of scramble to get that season done. I mean, they basically did it without like the Marlins and the Cardinals didn't play all the games that they were supposed to, or something like that, a game or two. Yeah. And that's ultimately what it was, is everyone played their 60 except for like one or two teams, from what I remember. I don't know. I mean, it was a miracle that they were able to pull it off last year, but I think a lot was learned over the years, and especially kind of came to a head in the 2020 pandemic season. So I will there be a strike by this time next year? Maybe, but I doubt it. I would think that, I think they sit down somewhere in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, or somewhere around then, to start kind of hammering it out. Maybe it'll get contentious enough where they don't have anything done by Christmas time, but I would think by like January, February, they'll iron something out. That's my prediction.
Otherwise, it is going to be a long, fire-filled, toxic-inducing negotiations if that's not the case. But that wasn't the case on this episode. I could talk to you all day. We've done it before. You can follow Paulie all over the universe. Check out Baseball Weekend Journal, wherever you get your favorite podcast, at Baseball Weekend Journal. Follow them on the socials at Baseball Weekend, and follow the man himself. Give him a birthday shout out this Monday, March 1st, 2021. Wish him a happy birthday. The man, the myth, the legend, Paulie Chivari. Follow him on Twitter at Paul Chivari. Paul, thank you so much, man. Happy birthday. As always, it is a pleasure, and nothing but love from us over here. You're truly one of the best. You got nothing but love for the sport. I see you grind. I am a witness to seeing you grind, put in the effort, and if you guys are looking for more in-detailed breakdowns of, we're talking about the minor league system, we're talking about players, bullpens, guys you've never heard of that will impact teams either this season or seasons moving forward. Paul Chivari is your man.
Baseball.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the dude literally covers international stuff, so check him out. I swear I vouch for him, and I vouch for the dude behind the podcast. Paulie, thank you for everything. Love to you and the family. Thank you for joining us here on Mercado Airwaves Sports from the Couch.
Hey, thanks for having me. And hey, to the baseball season, it's begun. And I can't wait to do this in a few weeks when we talk about opening day and what it's going to look like this year.
Cheers to you and the sport, my man.
You too, man.
And that'll do it for us on this edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. And a huge thank you to Paul Chivari from Baseball Weekend Journal. Hopefully you enjoyed our interview, and make sure you stay tuned with the network as we do our Major League Baseball preview as we get ready for the 2021 season. That will be recorded in just a few weeks. Super excited for that. But I thought this was a fun episode, and hopefully you each enjoyed it. And with that, don't forget, you can follow us all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and the show's on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. Like, rate, review, and shares wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. Become a producer of the show at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves, the home to our interviews with athletes and celebrities that you can get ad-free and before anybody else. That's patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Check out our swag at teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Come play video games with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves. And keep up to date with everything we're doing on the network, from the True Crime Show, the Pop Culture Show, our sister podcast, the Gone Missing Podcast, by following us on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy all the games. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We will see you next time here on Sports from the Couch on the Mercado Airwaves Network. I'm Mike Mercado.